Good morning, everyone. My name's Debbie Mann, and I'm with Festivals and Events Ontario, and thank you for joining us at Tuesday Talks with FEO. We've got an interesting conversation going to be happening with Pat from Partnering Against Trafficking. Tina will tell us how we got here in a minute, but I just wanted to introduce Pat. Pat is actually a survivor of trafficking. She and I met a few years ago through a networking event, and we kind of clicked and have been keeping in touch through social media. And when this topic came up, she was the first person I went to, so it's no surprise that we met a few years ago, Pat. So welcome to Tuesday Talks with FEO.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You may have to speak up a bit, Pat, because you're a little low in your voice.
Low?
What's that?
I said I'm a little low here.
There, that's better. That's
okay,
better.
perfect.
Thanks. And I'd like to introduce Tina Myers from Niagara Parks, and she's also on our FEO board. Tina's going to be co-hosting with me today so that she's coming at it from a parent's perspective, so as well as an event perspective. So Tina, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how this came about?
Sorry, I'm trying to decline it and it took over. So hello everyone, I'm Tina Myers. I'm with the Niagara Parks and I am on the Festival and Events Ontario Board of Directors, and I'm happy to be here talking with everyone. And I'm just going to say welcome and thank you, Pat, so much. It was a few months ago we had an event here in Niagara Falls where an attempted kidnapping took place. Where the whole convention center locally had to go into lockdown. It was an attempt from someone who was working with the vendors. So it was actually someone within the circle, and it was attempted twice, not once, but twice. So it got me thinking, and over the years I've always been concerned. At our opening ceremonies we always had search and rescue, a volunteer group on site for lost parents, and we had protocols put in place. And but with human trafficking becoming more and more prevalent in our communities, it seemed like what could we be doing more? And I think it's starting off with education and understanding that this is in our backyards. This is here in Ontario. And I think being aware is the first step for us to be able to put into place different policies and procedures to keep our communities safer at our events. That was kind of how we got to this space. I know I was at a soccer game a couple weeks ago with my son, and my little one wanted to go play in the park. So I walked him over to the park to play, and there was a little boy, and I'm sure it was innocent, but my mind was thinking about it. He kept trying to get Nicholas, my 6-year-old, away from the park, further and further and further. And I didn't understand. I kept calling him back, saying, you need to come back and stay in this space. So it just made me think of this and think, you know what, we really need to all be aware of what's going on.
Thanks, Tina.
So, handing it over to you, Pat.
Yeah. So Pat, why don't you give us a bit of a history of how you came into this world of partnering against trafficking?
Okay. Well, my story starts, and this is the first time I'm sharing publicly about being trafficked myself. And many times we don't know even that we're being trafficked, right? You think it's something else. So I'll go back 41 years ago, and that I had a sister who was trafficked, and ultimately she died. It was ruled a suicide. However, after investigation and learning more about my sister's story, I learned that she was being trafficked and internationally trafficked, right? And this was 41 years ago. She died in Toronto, and she was killed ultimately by the hands of her trafficker. And so growing up, I was always, curiosity kind of kills the cat, right? And there was times when I was a teenager where I would be at, bars where you're not even old enough to get in, but you sneak off to parties and things. And it was a friend who tried to introduce me into trafficking, or into meeting her pimp at the time. And at that point, I was like, no way, I'm not interested, things like that. So I ended up moving on. I got a really good job working as a family and community support worker in the high-risk community that I was raised in. And, I always needed, like, things are hard right now. We think about COVID, right? I needed a second income. And so somebody introduced me to direct sales. And what was happening was I was hosting parties for a company. I won't say what their name is, but they sold adult products. And what happened was I was doing a private party in the Thousand Islands, and a woman who was, not fitting the description of what a pimp would look like, middle-aged, dressed very nice, pulled up in her Cadillac truck, and she comes in, and, all the girls and stuff are buying products and stuff. At this point, I'm not really sure where I am, but it's just a kind of like it was a booking from another party that I had. And this woman approached me with, you would be really excellent, Patricia or Patty or Pat, whatever, at doing the door at our studio. And now, mind you, this place had been operating in our city for many, many years, right? So they were licensed. It was an escort massage studio. She says, you won't be seeing clients, things like that. You'll be doing doors. So that led into, okay, yeah, I will do that. And then we had a regular customer. I'm just going to kind of share my story on how easily you can get roped in and you don't even know that you're getting roped in. He came up and he was a spender of, like, say 20 to 30,000 in cash. And he came up during the day. And during the day I would clean and do towels and bedding and different things. And you would greet the people at the door when they came up, and they would meet the ladies who were working. Now, girls there could pick whether or not they did services or not, and they could pass it off to somebody else. So he came up and he said, I want to see, we'll say Kylie, okay? Because we all go by different names when we're working. And I said, no, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And he was a fetish client, if that doesn't really make sense here, maybe. But she said, her attitude went from, like, very nice to very different, in that you need to see, like, we're going to lose this client and it's going to be because of you. And when other girls arrive, they can see him. But for now, it's you. And it was like, it just went from a very different dynamic and relationship wise. And I felt obligated to the other girls who I had gotten to know, and that were going to be losing money if I didn't do this particular call, right? We'll call it. And that's kind of how it started, in that one thing led to another, where it's, you owe me now door fees, or you're late for your shift and now you owe money, and, trying to get out of that. So ultimately I ended up being able to get away in 2010, I want to say, and was able to restart my life in different things. So people within the network of workers know what I do, and that I support, even if I think some people start off in, like, you're starting off as in sex work, and you think, okay, I'm just working in adult entertainment, I'm working at the bar, whatever it might be. And then you fall into this, you're being trafficked, but you don't even know that it's being trafficked, because trafficking didn't even get a label until, I think, 2010, right? Which is where I kind of exited. But I went down this rabbit hole of just trying to figure out what my sister experienced, what it was all about. Curiosity killed the cat. So that's basically, I would say, what happened in my situation.
Wow.
And that's what I'm sharing that publicly. So I usually
the PG version, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So Pat and Tina, jump in anytime, but so you had a hard time getting out based on our conversation. And so what is the dynamic of sex trafficking? So in the realm of festivals and events, how would they recruit? I mean, Tina experienced it or heard about it from the event that was happening at the convention center in Niagara Falls. In your years of doing this, how do they recruit kids? How do they kidnap them? And
yeah, I'm going to say they're very strategic and looking to see the vulnerable person, right? Like, I came from a home, like my family was together until I was 14, but there were things going on, right? I had, like, a court case happening, and there were, like, vulnerabilities within myself that I was more prone to, you know, needing support or needing that extra love in things, right? So they pick up on, okay, maybe this person doesn't really have a stable home environment. They can't talk to their parents. They're kind of rebelling, or the group of people that they're hanging around with, they just, I don't even know how they do it, but it's like they just zero in and they become so good and so skilled at what they're doing, you don't even realize, right? And even people with experience, like I had been working at that point for about 6 years as a frontline worker. So I was a professional working with kids 0 to 6 and their families. So for me to even fall into it, right, I still had those issues that I hadn't internally dealt with.
What did they do? Do they stalk you? Do they go to...
Yeah, so they'll do all kinds of things. I want to say they will, if there's an event happening, right? So you know how you'll say, oh, I'm going to be in attendance or things. They will even stalk people's Facebook page or their Instagram page, and they might double team, right? So you might have one person on there saying, hey, you know, come to this event. It's going to be super fun. Another person comes on and is mean and nasty. And then the other person comes down like they're the knight in shining armor, like, I'm protecting the person, and you know, don't talk to them like that. And then you become trusting of this person, right? Because they just offended you and they seem interested, or maybe they're buying you something to wear to the event, or it could be any, like, they're just very tactical. And they usually use, I would say, friends, right? Like somebody that you're close with and somebody that you know within that network who they've already kind of got their claws into, and they'll coerce them by, you know, having them attend a party, take pictures of them, get them intoxicated, and then say, well, you know what, if you say anything, I'm going to share this on social media, so now you owe me, right? And so then you become ashamed and you don't want to say anything, and you're kind of bringing other people along, right? If that makes sense.
And I don't know, Tina, there's so much here. Do you have any questions?
I think how can we set up safety nets in our festivals and events? One, I'm thinking more from people trying to lure children away, or educating our visitors on what is out there. So I'll bring it back to my son playing in the playground and being pulled away by even another child. These are things that I think when we have our kid zones, they're quite crazy. You've got inflatables going on, you've got face painters, you've got all of these things going on. Little maybe tidbits of us to be able to be more aware in the areas. How do we train our volunteers to be, you know, like obviously we can't be the babysitters of all these children, but if being aware, we might notice that, oh, wait a minute, this, you know, this child's being pulled away type thing.
Yeah, you want me to address that, Tina, and what I think?
Yeah, just from your being an advocate in this industry, what your thoughts are.
I think a flyer, like some type of flyer that you can attach into, like, say, the ticket stub, or as they're entering in, and then vendors in your policies and procedures or your information package that you include, you know, some preventive measures and some resource links and things, and maybe a main person to contact within the event, that if you feel like this is going on, or if you are suspicious, then to give you a call or something, that you can address the situation. Because you're right, like we've got these eyes and we might suspect something, but we're not really sure. And I'm always say, follow your gut instinct, right? If you're a vendor or a person attending an event and you feel like something may be off, it's best to kind of take action. Now, I'm not saying call the police, but maybe somebody who could be in charge of, like, let's have a conversation, right? And then you could maybe have some more training. That person could have some more training on what to do in that situation, right? Like the situation that happened with the two. the two attempts there, right? So preventative measures, I think, in education.
And I think empowering our volunteers to be able to be comfortable enough to go up to a situation. I know one thing you can see trending on TikTok and stuff is where they'll put people into situations to see what people around will do. They're all done by actors. It'll be something where someone will actually be like, "Hey, do you remember me? I met you with your mom. How about you come with me?" Or someone trying to actually physically kidnap someone and no one does anything. No one steps in or, says like, "Hey, wait a minute, what are you doing?" Because a lot of the time it's not about being confrontational or anything like that. Is if someone just expresses an interest, usually that would be enough to break what is about to happen.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, like my other thing is that if there is some kind of device, like parents, right, that you can see your child's location, or that they could press a button of some sort, or my daughter just went off to university, so we got her like one of these buttons that if she pushes it, it goes bing, 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 and it makes like really loud noises, right? If you could maybe brand a product like that as your organization to sell, like say it's $1 or $2 or whatever, to raise awareness, and then giving them tools that if they're out, in any situation, that they would have that tool in your website and stuff, and maybe with a link that would give resources and stuff to that. Yeah. That's just some of my ideas. I've got lots of ideas, but.
And one thing, what might be interesting is putting it out to our membership to see what everyone in our industry's best practices are of how they deal with a lost child. What are their protocols? When do you actually lock down your site? And do you have those procedures in place? I know that I was just working Comic-Con and a child went missing at Comic-Con, and immediately all doors were locked. The building was secure, nobody in, nobody out. So I think, and the child was found, but it's just one of those things of how quickly we react and how we put these procedures into place. Do we think about them being, we're in Canada, we're in Ontario, and often we think that those things aren't happening, but they're very, very prevalent here in our communities. So we want to make sure that we're not overlooking those things.
Yeah, and I want to say, with youth being in Toronto and you look at the Thousand Islands in Belleville, Brockville, is that we're part of a big waterway that enters into the U.S., right? So for cross-border transporting, right, there's ways that you don't even think, right? So you get them on a boat, you get them under the boat, whatever, and you have them all the way in another country at this point, and nobody is aware of this, right? So and not that nobody's aware, they're aware that it's going on, but there's so much stuff happening that it's going to take an army of us to pay attention,
I also, Kyle just put something here. One thing we do at some busker festivals is if Amber Alerts for lost or missing child goes out on the walkies, a volunteer steps in to let any entertainer know. They immediately stop all shows and use their microphones to amplify the lost child message, and everything holds until they're found. Well, that's really interesting. Wow. But I did have another question, because when Tina and I were originally talking, one of the questions I had was, do you get a police, is it too much to ask for a police check from your vendors?
I would say no. At this point, you risk, some people not coming in as vendors, but if you set the standard, I want to say the gold standard, the platinum standard, in being the leader in, that you've had this situation happen, and that most people are going to understand the seriousness of it, and that it's a preventive measure. It's not, and if you're asking everybody as a vendor I just don't know how complicated that might be to implement. It might take some time.
Yeah.
The concept of it is a great idea. The actual backlog on it is the police. On the police side of things, there is a major backlog just to get them processed. What we do is we have it in our volunteer database that are you willing to get a police check? And predominantly people are very honest about, yes, that's okay. And we say, there is a time where we will be submitting these. So it could be even just a matter of saying, we will do these are something that could take place, but not saying as to putting it on their side of having it, just more that we could be processing this.
Yeah, and that it may also come down to like it sometimes it might just take some time, right, to put that system in place, but maybe also there may be some ways to lobby police to put a special unit or a special forward together to be the leaders in taking the initiative to stop it, right, like to process them a little bit faster somehow, or whether that's a volunteer person processing them or something. I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like some lobbying would be helpful.
I think definitely lobbying from more the level of the policing and how we how we work with them on kind of a fast track lane that says, like if we're processing a lot at a time, and it's anything like for us, it's hard to manage because it's not just your vendors or your volunteers, but you could also have, all your guests, and you can't expect that everyone would be police checked, and also keeping in mind that a police check is only as good as
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So, Deb, you have a couple hands up here.
Virginia has her hand up. Go ahead. Hey, Virginia, good to see you on board.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Yes, just to amplify what was previously said, a police check sometimes gives event organizers a false sense of security because all it does is identify people who've been caught. It doesn't identify people who haven't been caught. So
Right.
that would be one caution that I would throw up. The other is in your pre-event meetings. We at the event that I worked at, we always had pre-event meetings with the local police organization. And what we did with our lost children protocol, we actually mirrored the various levels of a lost child or a lost person. And that would clearly then define what parameters the search took. If it was a 15-year-old kid who had purposely dumped mom and dad on the midway, they weren't as concerned about that as obviously somebody who perhaps has some challenges, or older folks, or really young children. And so it was this 4-level classification that we would put a child into or a person into when they were lost. And then that level would dictate what the search parameters were. And of course, we were always in communication with the police. They knew of every single person that was missing, but they also worked with us in classifying what category that person was put into, and then that would dictate how the search rolled out.
Can I add something to that, Virginia?
Certainly.
And that my concern is when you said the 15-year-old, right, that just kind of like abandons their parents. And I think that this is where we're starting to educate police and border services and stuff more on these issues, is that the 15-year-old may be at the bigger risk.
Right. And I've been out of the industry now for 3 years.
Yes.
And obviously trafficking of people was not a huge thing on our radar. Plus we weren't in a border jurisdiction. So
Yes,
I understand and appreciate that the environment has changed, and that this, now when we went to the police, they may have changed those categories. Maybe the example I used was a bad example.
No, I think you're very correct, and they're still using these categories, Virginia.
So they may have modified those categories now to take into consideration things like abduction and those types of things where people are, being used in inappropriate ways. I mean, this is something that we never had to think about 10 years ago, quite frankly.
You
We didn't, right?
Yeah, didn't know.
Right. And
And
now,
I think
the world,
I think the big thing here is showing how something that seems so innocent is actually not, and how we need to start educating all of us, because obviously this isn't an easy fix. This isn't something, wasn't a discussion where we were getting something to go back and implement right away. This is opening the dialogue for us to start educating ourselves on. This is now in our backyards. This is something that we all need to be concerned about in so many levels. I don't know where how policy and procedure can actually be implemented with it being such a large thing. But I think the more we educate our volunteers, we educate our people we're working with, it becomes part of our regular language. That alone is taking some major steps to educate everyone on human trafficking, and that it is here.
right.
Yeah.
And it's similar to when, when we organized our events previously, we knew that we were a place that could attract pedophiles and child abusers and, sexual predators and all of that stuff. So now we're just adding another category of bad people to that group. And as you say, it's really about educating our staff and our volunteers about things to be aware of, things to look for, right? And then I think that's about the best that you can do. And having that relationship with law enforcement so that when you do call and say, hey, we've got a concern here, they react, right? And that's all about building those relationships prior to your event.
Right. And I think also when we're setting up our children's areas, being aware of what is an easy way of abducting a kid. Like, are we putting our children's area where the back end of it is all open and easy to go? Or is it in an area where maybe there's a fence along the back? Maybe there's a building, because each one of our sites is so unique and so different. So when we're going into those planning stages, are we taking into account how we lay out our children's areas? Do they, are they contained? Is it in, I've seen many festivals, they put like a fencing around it. Helps the parents out for, being able to corral the kids, or if one mom's there with 3 kids, knowing that, okay, I'm near the entrance exit. I can see that my kids are in front of me as they're running around crazy. So are we taking that into consideration when planning out our various sites?
Oh, I think that's a great point. Love that.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that we also did, and just building on that, because layout of your event is so key for safety and security of your patrons. So clearly, sticking your children's activities not next to your main exit is probably a good idea. But we had the luxury of this, that we were a huge event and we had a big budget. So take this all with a grain of salt. But we took our paid duty officers and we had them positioned at each of our gates. And they were a deterrent, not only to people coming in, but to people leaving. And they were instructed to be active. We just didn't want, bumps and logs sitting there at, $120 an hour. We wanted them to be active. We wanted them to be engaging with our customers, and really so that people were aware that they were there watching the comings and goings of the place. And they were planted right where the exit was, so they could see all of those families coming out. Obviously they're the ones who are trained the most in this, and so it just created that extra layer of protection. But no plan is perfect. I recognize that, but all these various elements, if you implement them and bring them all together, it certainly helps to increase the prevention level at your event.
And I think also if we add to our volunteers training about interacting with the consumer, the visitors that are there, because you never know when you might actually get that one person where you've just interrupted a dialogue that might not be good, just by saying, hey, how's your day going? Are you enjoying the festival? We're so glad that you came out to participate. If we're getting our volunteers to kind of interact with the patrons. And I know just from doing the last little bit that we've done, volunteers are at a shortage. Staffing in general is at a shortage. So I know we're all really working hard to try to increase that. But Pat, from your experience, would you think like that customer service might interrupt something that could be in play?
I think so, right? I think anytime that you're, they know you're paying attention then, right? If you're having a conversation, right? You're asking questions, it kind of puts somebody on well, they've noticed me, right? It's not like you've not been noticed, right? You've been talked to by someone, right? So I think absolutely that would be beneficial and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I remember many years ago talking to a man who worked with criminals, and he would interview criminals to try to see where they were going, like to get ahead of the game, because every time any of our communities try to educate, block, stop things like human trafficking going, they just get smarter. They have to find another way. How do we take, like, I know this is kind of a redundant question. I don't even know if there's an answer to it, but how do we understand what's going on out there, Pat? I mean, they're so subtle. I mean, I remember you saying to me, sometimes it's like you said, they go to a fair or a festival, and there'll be two teenage boys, and one will be the bully and the other one will come in as the hero, and then they woo them. It's not an immediate thing. It's a wooing.
Yeah, and it's not something that it's a grooming, right? It's not something that might happen at the event. It's like they met at the event and now I'm going to a party this weekend, right? And then that drugging and the pictures and the shaming happens. And the other thing that I feel that we need to be aware of, in that it's not talked about a lot in Canada or Ontario, the US, is that the lack of supports that there are for young boys or men who are being lured in to either become traffickers or being trafficked themselves. In that there's a bigger shame, I feel, with boys, right? In that, or not really awareness of what could happen, right? So
would girls do the same thing with boys about?
Oh, absolutely, right? You think of a boy who's vulnerable, maybe he's got problems at home with his family, and then you've got a girl who's already been groomed into this culture, and we call it the game, right? And he's wanting to, like, this girl's paying him attention, and hey, come to this party and let's hang out. And so it's very easy for boys to be vulnerable and fall into the trap of, now I'm being taken off to another city or drugged, or and even more not wanting to share what is happening with them. And I feel like boys, they're more like, boys shouldn't cry, things like that. They've grown up with that being embedded in them. So I feel boys are more or less to share with their peers, even on if something like that were to happen, right? So their closest friends and family, that they may not even tell anybody. They'll hold it for forever.
And
are there any signs? Oh, sorry, Tina, go ahead.
And we're in a position as festivals and events where we're taking on a lot of kids from grade 8 through high school and entry-level college and university students at all of our events. We are in a sense, we're mentoring these kids into their next step of employment. We are empowering these kids to take on responsibilities at our events. And I think we have a huge role to our communities to help guide them and give them that confidence and give them the abilities to be able to be aware of what's going on. I think even when we're educating the young people in our volunteer orientations and we educate them a little bit on this, I think that is also taking a step to helping prevent human trafficking. Like, I think we take for granted how much of an impression we have on a large amount of our youth through our own festivals and events. I know I participate in many different activities in my community as a volunteer, but then also in my own role here at Niagara Parks, I manage the volunteer program. And there's a lot of kids that we are working with that we need to be able to empower them to have that confidence to, you know, be able to talk to us, be able to know that, you know, maybe this path is going the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Pat, are there any groups out there that help support or train people, like our festivals and events, to train people? Are there train the trainers kind of groups out there that can show us and help us educate our teams, like Tina was saying, our volunteer coordinators, and just to keep an eye out for things? I mean, we can't solve the problem like Tina was saying, but we can certainly help.
Yeah, there are a few organizations. See, even so, you may get some that are like paid conferences and trainings. There is, and I'll have to look at what the website is, but there is a website, I think it was Ontario or Canada, that launched that trains organizers or different things and ways to spot human trafficking, and it's free, which is good, and it goes through different lessons. And I will look up what that is and get back to you on an answer with what that site is.
Great.
There's groups that will come in and talk with people. And I, like, for myself, like Partnering Against Trafficking, we've been doing this a couple of years, and ultimately my goal with Partnering Against Trafficking is to have different organizations such as yourself that are partners against trafficking. So we're all coming together as partners against trafficking, and then we can pool together, this is ultimately in my mind, you know, all of those other little organizations throughout the world, really, because this is a world issue, and bring our networks together to partner against trafficking and almost become a community within ourselves that are partners against trafficking, all partnering together and share resources and trainings and different things, right? Because I'm sure that the Toronto police, right, and Kingston police and Niagara police, and everybody has got different scenarios or different situations that have happened, and that could aid in helping us, right? Because every city is different with what they're doing with prevention and training and education, right?
And I think also being aware of what resources are available in our communities. So I don't know if this is something that is common in other areas, but we have search and rescue, which we have come to many of our events in the community. And search and rescue is there they will set up the protocols for a lost child. They walk around the event with radios and they're just there as volunteers who are first aid training, and they come as well as St. John's ambulance. They work together, and it's just more of a presence. And then there's also the fingerprint clinics. Sometimes in the past, I've invited them to be there. And again, it's bringing that awareness, doing that kind of being a part of our community. It provides a free clinic to get the fingerprints from all the kids. And then it also is at the same time subconsciously on the top of parents' minds to be aware of these things.
Yes, I love that. And can you imagine, like, I picture in my mind like a hashtag, Partners Against Trafficking, which is part of the Partnering Against Trafficking network. And, you know, places like that, search and rescue, fingerprint clinics could all be, you know, say a hashtag on the sleeve of their shirt at events or different things that they are part of this network, right? So that we can start identifying who's partnering against trafficking, who's working together to solve an issue that's, well, bigger than ourselves, right?
Wow. Well, I don't even know what to say.
This is just stuff I kind of come out with the stuff out of my head. It's been in there. I've got lots of, ideas. And it's just, I think, partnering with the right people that can make it a difference and make it happen, right? On a large scale. Because this isn't a little issue. It's a big issue.
It's a huge issue. I mean, when I was talking to a few people about this, you can't, I don't know how, once you're in it, I don't even know how you get out of it. And there was a documentary done where, the traffickers just laughed at somebody wanting to just take one girl, and they just said, you can't afford her. So it's insidious.
Yeah, because they make them like 350,000 or more a year, right? That's on a low end of one person, right? Being trafficked, they can sell a girl like 9 to 16 times an evening or in a day, right? And if you look at Tina, what you said about youth, like it hit me in that, when I was younger in the bar area where I'm sneaking off to events, I'm doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, right? And that if I would have had a guidance counselor or, a youth diversion type of, person at your youth group that maybe I would have went to them and talked to them about my other friend who was already in. She was already been roped in. She was 13, 14 years old, right? And I've seen her now like ahead in years later, in that if you had helped her, maybe her life would have been a little bit different than it is right now. And I think as youth, we want to help. We want to help our society. We want to help our world. And I can say that I feel like nobody is born and wants to go into, adult entertainment or adult, work, right? And boys and young girls, and I'm saying young girls as well, like, or women don't want to become traffickers either, right? Because it's not just men that are trafficking, it's females as well. So we're not born and saying, well, we want to recruit people into the sex trade, or we want to, do this. It just becomes, right? Your peers and the people you associate with. So I think the power behind the youth being more empowered in getting the word out there.
And maybe helping them to watch out for each other to a certain degree, as opposed to
Exactly.
Although that's, I think, a pie in the sky kind of thing with teenage hormones, but
and take the shame out of it, right? Because there's a lot of shame around when we look at youth, right? There's certain things that we don't talk about around our kitchen tables, at least when I was growing up, is like sex, money, drugs, alcohol. Maybe you don't have those conversations. You just don't, right? Or you're a bit afraid to talk to your parents about some things. So if maybe there's somebody else that you feel you can confide in, and opening the doors of having the conversations, because now with internet and pictures, and like before something happened, it wasn't like they could shame you by blasting it all over to your friends list on social media, right? And now they have the power to do those things. So I really feel like education and taking the shame away, that if you were to have pictures or videos taken of you, just know that you're going to be supported, right? Like take the shame out of coming forward with your story. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Are there any, Tina, do you have anything else, or?
No, I think it was the main thing was bringing it forward so that we could talk about it, so that we can start the first steps in educating our industry, who is such a huge influencer of so many young people. And I think that was pretty much it. And just, I know just at home, like I think my kids would wish that I was a little bit less talkative about things. They get pretty embarrassed because I am pretty open book about everything. And just recently, a little boy in the U.S. Had a picture that it was being threatened if he didn't pay money to go to his parents, and it was something that he was so bothered by that he killed himself. And And that was something I talked to my boys about. I'm like, hey, like, I changed your bum. Like, you know, is that the worst thing that could happen is a picture? I said, one, I don't want you giving pictures to people, but if this scenario were to happen, you know, come to me. You know, this is what we need to talk about. So there are lots of different scenarios of things that kids are dealing with that we never dealt with before.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments? Nothing? Pat, any last words?
Thank you for having me. And if there's anything at all that I can do to, you know, guide or support you in education or just awareness or things, maybe we put together a program or something for this. I'm open.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you, Tina, for joining me on this. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this event. Kyle, thank you for that comment. And we are going to, Tuesday Talks will come back again in the fall, but we will be continuing on with Festivals Helping Festivals almost every first Tuesday of the month, unless there's a long weekend that hits before it. It'll be the following Tuesday. Looking forward to seeing you in July. Thank you so much for this. And Pat, I'll be in touch with you. Tina, I'll be in touch with you. And if anybody has any questions about this, please email me and we'll get back to you. Thanks.
Yeah,
Have a great week, everyone. Take care.
Sorry, can I add one more thing?
Yeah,
Deb,
sure.
before you shut it down, is that if anybody wants to join our Partnering Against Trafficking group on Facebook, if you could go through Deb and we can get you added. I'll send you the link to that group. It is a private group, Deb, so
Okay.
I'll send you the direct link into that group, and you know, organizations and people are allowed to join us there.
Perfect. We'll look at that. Thanks, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you so
And
much.
thanks. Take care. See you next week. Or, yep, nope, 2 weeks. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.